By the end of this video, you will have learned every single piece of N5 level Japanese grammar thanks to over 100 different examples taken from over 60 different video games throughout video game history. My name's Matt and welcome to my video game textbook. As we work through all of the grammar points in the Japanese JLPT N5 level, I will try to be as concise as possible while also giving detailed explanations of each of the grammar points. I will include examples taken from scenes from all of your favorite video games to help both give you context as well as give you visual connection to each of these pieces of grammar being used so that you can learn exactly how they are used and also help you feel as confident as possible in mastering N5 Japanese. So without further ado, let's get started. あら、フェイ、アルールに何か用なの？本当はもう今日から男の人は中へ入れちゃいけない決まりになってるんだけど、ちゃいけない must not do in spoken Japanese. So the first way of expressing must not do in spoken Japanese is this ちゃいけない. It's actually the colloquial version of てはいけない by turning the ては into ちゃ or じゃ. This first example, ちゃいけない, is used when the verb's て form ends in a て sound in the て form, like 食べる to eat turning into 食べて, so you can see it ends in a て. Or, for this example, 入れて to put in. So to say that you must not put in would be 入れちゃいけない in spoken Japanese. Now this first example is slightly more formal and indirect, ikenai meaning no good or must not, and it's often used when expressing rules or common knowledge. As the woman that the main character here is talking to isn't particularly close and is telling him of a rule that men must not come inside, she uses 入れちゃいけない to express must not put or let in. それから、ここは危険だ。どこかへ釣った方がいい。そうだね。でも必ず迎えに来るんだよ。死んじゃいけないよ。And so, as I mentioned, there's the second style, the じゃ. Now, this じゃ is used when the て form ends in a で sound, like 飲む to drink turning into 飲んで. Or in this example, 死ぬ to die turning into 死んで when put in the て form. So you use 死んじゃいけない, you must not die. Again, as before, this is being used colloquially in a spoken manner in a kind of slightly formal or strict manner. The woman here is telling Barrett a sort of rule or agreement. She will take care of his daughter so long as he doesn't die. He must not die. It's forbidden. So both of these forms come from the original ては ikenai, which we will cover later in this video. But now onto a different one. We have ちゃ or じゃだめ.
未来は変えられる。小玉さん、こんなところで死んじゃダメなんです。
Now, if you're wanting to use the same expression as before, but in a little bit more of a casual or emotional or a direct way, you would use ダメ instead of いけない. ダメ means kind of bad, いけない is a little bit more like no good. So in this example, the main character is yelling at the old man in a quite emotional manner that he must not die in a place like this. It's not necessarily a rule or an agreement, it's just an emotional declaration. It's close, it's direct. If you were to tell your family or friends that they must not do something without sounding like you're kind of teaching them a rule, then ちゃ or じゃだめ is the grammar point to use.
ザナルカンド。
そう、ザナルカンド。およそ1000年前の姿です。
Des, to be. Des is one of the most common pieces of grammar in all of Japanese. It's used at the end of sentences to state that something is. Often translated as to be in English as it shares the same usage. Take for example these words by themselves. Big, 大きい, small, 小さい, fat, futoi, and yummy, oishii. They are all by themselves and they don't have any clear direction of how they're being used. However, by adding des to the ends of these words, you can now state that something is big, oki des, or is small, chisai des, or in this case, is the appearance of Zanarkand roughly 1,000 years ago. It can also be conjugated into the past form with deshta, meaning was or were. So des is quite polite, but if you want it to be more casual, we have da, to be, the casual form. So just like des, da is used in the exactly same way, however this is the casual version. It's used in more casual settings like with family or friends. If you were to use des all the time, non-stop, you may start to sound a little bit either overly polite or a little bit robotic, and so da is the more casual way of expressing exactly the same thing. So in this situation where Kazuya from Tekken 7 is sending Heihachi to his grave, it is much more appropriate for him to be using Hakaba da, it is your grave, and Owari da, it is the end, as this occasion does not call for him using polite speech.
どうしたじゃないよほんとバカ最悪もう信じらんないあんたら最低ロープ切れちゃうしどうしていいかわかんないし心配したんだからすっげえ心配したんだからね
だから because, so, and that is why. Dakara is incredibly useful to help express reason. These three English expressions are some of the more common translations, and it depends on context which one is most fitting. However, at its core, dakara is used to express reason for something. I'm hungry, so let's have pizza. Onaka suita, dakara pizza tabeyo. Or in this case, Chie is explaining why she has been so worried, and so she's just used it at the end of the sentence to say, that's why I've been so worried.
はいはい返すよもう一度奪い取るだけさ
Dake, only, just, or as much as. Dake has two core differences in meaning. Only and just, and then this as much as. Okay, let's look at the first one. If you had one person, hitori, and you wanted to say only one person, you would say hitori dake. Only one person. Or just one person. Or for example, here from Final Fantasy X-2, mo ichido ubai toru dake. I only need, or I just need, to steal it back once more. It can also be used to express as much as, like in the expression dekiru dake, to do as much as one can. 俺も剣の震えばよかった。しばらくクソじじ相手ばっかりだったからな。腕がなまって仕方がない。いえいえ。ルカ様が剣を振るっても、うちの兵どもは物足りないでしょう。でしょう。I think, it seems, probably, or right. Desho can be used in place of des, so it's polite, in all situations to imply a degree of probability or speculation. You could say that something is probably okay, or you could think that it's okay by saying I desho. I meaning good, and desho makes it sound like you're either stating that it's probably okay or speculating on whether it is, and perhaps asking for confirmation. In this example, Raudo is saying to Ruka that he thinks that his own troops would not be enough if Ruka were to wield his blade. He is being polite as he is speaking to a senior officer and is in a way reassuring Ruka that his sword skills are still quite formidable.
クラリス、いるんだろう。ここを開けてくれないか。
だろう。 Now, daro is the casual form of でしょう. It is used in the exact same way, it's just more casual, and it's used in place of da. In this example, the man is asking Clarice if she's in there, but he's quite sure that she is, and so he says, いるんだろ? You're in there, right? This shows that the character has either a close relationship with Clarice or that he's perhaps a little bit more of a casual speaker, and so he uses daro instead of でしょう. In the first example, we saw that it was being used to reassure, and this time it's being used for confirmation. You're in there, right?
お主が目覚めてより幾度か耳にした導きの言葉。あれは今もハイラル城でガノンを抑え続けているゼルダの声だ。
で at or in. The first definition we have of で is used to express the location where an action occurs. The word before the で particle must be a location noun in this usage. For example, 学校で勉強する. I study at school. Or in this example from Zelda Breath of the Wild, the king is telling Link that the voice of Zelda that he can hear is at or in Hyrule Castle, Hairarujo de. So if you want to say that you are doing an action at a specific location, you can use de to express that. あいあいあいあい。み名前はファンキーコングね。みのスペシャルタル付きジャンボジェットで島のどこでもご案内よ。で with or by. So de can also be used to express a means or method of doing something. 車で行く. I will go by car. Or here, Funky Kong is telling Donkey Kong that he will guide you around the island with the Jumbo Jet Barrel. Jumbo Jet で案内する.
でも最近、カムロ町で最大の話題はこれ。連続殺人だ。
Demo, but, however, though. It is often used to start a new sentence or to connect two contradicting ideas in a very similar way that but or however is used in English. Pizza ga suki desu. Demo, niku mo suki desu. I like pizza, but I also like meat. So it can be used at the beginning of a sentence or in the middle. Now here from the video game Judgment or Judge Eyes, we have but lately, demo saikin. This is an incredibly useful grammar pattern that is used very similar to the English counterparts. Just don't get it confused with temo demo, which is a separate grammar for N4 and means something completely different. 君はどんな力を望む? Donna, what kind of or what sort of? This grammar pattern is used to ask about the state or characteristic of something. What kind of pizza do you like? どんなピッツァが好きですか? Here asking what type or flavor of pizza do you like? Or like here in Kingdom Hearts, what kind of power do you seek? どんな力が望む? And so just like in English, you put it before the noun that you want to inquire about.
どうして戻ってきた?
どうして Why or for what reason? どうして is used to ask someone why they do something, such as, why do you like games? どうしてゲームが好き? Or in this case, from Metal Gear Solid 3, the boss is asking Naked Snake why he came back. どうして戻ってきた? It can also be used to ask how. For example, どうしてそれをしている? How or why do you know that?
終わったらもう一度照明弾を使うからこの先の空き地でお茶を。
待てよ。どうやってスラムに戻る? 始発に紛れ込むか?
どうやって How, in what way, or by what means. どうやって is a very useful expression that focuses on the means of doing something. 駅までどうやって行きますか? How do I get to the station? Or take this example from Final Fantasy VII Remake, where Biggs is asking Jesse precisely how they're supposed to get back to the slums. どうやってスラムに戻る? How do we get back to the slums?
僕はどのくらい成長できたんだろう。
ゴングが鳴れば全てがわかるんだ。
Ga, the subject or identifier particle. The first use of ga at the N5 level is to mark the subject of a sentence. Now, this term can be a little bit confusing for those who aren't familiar with what a subject of a sentence is. But just try to think of it like the doer of the action in the sentence, or the identifier of who, what, and why. There's a term is what in English that can often be a nice translation. For example, コンビニが近くにあります. Literally, a convenience store is what is nearby. Or here from Hajime no Ippo, ゴングが鳴れば when the bell is what rings, everything is what will be understood. すべてがわかる. Now, it sounds unnatural in English, but think of it like the particle that shows you what is doing the verb. What rings? ゴングが. The bell does. What is understood? Everything is. すべてが. Everything is. So you can see here that it's answering that question, even if it's not being asked. If you want a more detailed explanation, check out my wa versus ga grammar video so that you can master both of these incredibly important particles.
ジェラルドさん、すまんが来てもらっていいか?
Ga, but, or however. The second use of ga is in the middle of a sentence, and this expresses a conjunction. 日本語を読むことはできますが、話すことはできません. I can read Japanese, but I can't speak it. So it's used just like but in English. And so here in Fire Emblem Three Houses, a man interrupts Gerald's conversation with his son and says, I'm sorry, but can I have you come with me? すまんが I'm sorry, but. Now, often following this conjunctive use of ga, we will see a comma following it to help you show that it's not the subject marker, but it's actually this but. But other times, you'll just need to know from context which is which. There won't always be a comma to help you out. Nani? 話があるって。がある. There is for non-living things. Now, if we place ある after the ga subject marker, we can use it to express that something exists or that you have something not living, like tables, you have a table, or chairs, and even abstract concepts like a conversation or feeling. So to state that they exist or that you have them. テレビがある? I have or there is a TV. Here, Tifa is saying to Cloud in a flashback that he said he had something that he wanted to talk to her about. Expressed simply with 話があるって. 話がある to have a conversation or something to talk about. Just keep in mind that this must not be used for living things. For that, we use
どんな事情があって人を殺めたのかは知らない。だが、外で待ってくれている人がいるなら耐えろ。
がいる. Now this is exactly the same as ga aru, but it's used for things with life, like people or animals. So here in this example, the prison guard is saying to Ichi that if he has someone waiting for him outside, 外で待ってくれている人がいるなら endure. So just be careful, aru is for non-living things and iru is for living things. 一度表出した戦闘本能は二度と眠ることはないのだ。より強烈なテンションが欲しくなる. Another example using the subject marker, now used with 欲しい to want something. It can be used with both kanji or simply written in hiragana only. So if you want something, simply put the noun that you want before ga 欲しい and you're good to go. Pizza ga 欲しい. Or as Big Boss from Metal Gear 2 says, once your fighting instinct is awakened, you become to want even more intensity. より強烈なテンションが欲しくなる. You become wanting more tension or intensity.
お前が他人の忠告に耳を貸すとはな。いやわんことはやめておけと言いたいところだな。 確かにこのオートでは少々気をつけた方がいいかもしれん。
方がいい had better, it should be better too, or you should. So now we're moving on to how to express that it would be better if you did a certain action. Here, following a verb in any tense, you put 方がいい to show that it would be better if you did that action. 勉強する方がいい you should study, or it would be better if you study. Or perhaps you were in a dangerous place and it would be better if you were more careful. Like here in Suikoden 5, 気をつけた方がいい you should be careful, or it would be better if you were careful. Now, ほ can be written with both either kanji or hiragana, and they're both used around the same amount, so just be aware that you can see this 方がいい with both the kanji or with the hiragana only, as they're both used around the same amount.
ああ、もうピーピーうるせえな。悪いけど今は忙しいんだ。ガキの相手をしてる暇はないんだよ。
E-adjectives, or 形容詞. In Japanese, there are actually two different types of adjectives, E-adjectives and Na-adjectives, and the way that you treat each is slightly different, especially when you conjugate them. Here with E-adjectives, you can tell that it's an E-adjective because an E-adjective ends in an E sound, although that's not always the case, so please be careful. For example, kirei for pretty is actually not an E-adjective. Now, when conjugating an E-adjective, perhaps you want to say that something was yummy, or it isn't yummy, or it was not yummy. So in order to do this, you need to drop the last E in the E-adjective and replace it with a ku, turning oishii into oishikatta, was yummy, or oishikunai, not yummy, or oishikunakatta, it was not yummy. And if you're not conjugating the E-adjective, you can just leave it nice and simple like here. I am busy, isogashii da. We can also turn E-adjectives into adverbs by replacing the E-adjective with ku, like here in Witcher 3.
近いぞ。
Geralt says that he will warmly welcome the beast. Atatakai is the E-adjective for warm. However, it's being turned into atatakaku kange suru, to warmly welcome. So this adjective is now being turned into an adverb.
潜入するとすれば、まず正面の扉。一番の近道だが、敵に見つかる可能性が高そうだな。
Ichiban, the most, the best. When you want to say that something is number one, you use Ichiban. Ichiban meaning one, and ban meaning number. This is also a useful way to express the most or the best. My most favorite food is pizza. Pizza ga ichiban suki na tabemono desu. It is the food that I most like. Or if you were like Solid Snake from Metal Gear Solid and you're looking for the shortest path into a nuclear storage facility, you would be looking for the Ichiban no chika michi, the most shortest path, or the best shortcut. To conjugate this grammar, you can either say noun ga ichiban, the noun is the most, or ichiban adjective, the most something. Ishoni, together. Next we have how to express doing something together with ishoni. This is often following the particle to, expressing with, like together with. For example, tomodachi to, with my friends, ishoni gakkou ni iku. I will go together to school. Here in Suikoden 2, you can do what is known in English as a unite attack, or simply in Japanese, attacking together. Ishoni kogeki suru, to attack together. So if you click on ishoni, you will now attack the enemy together. So next time you're doing something together with your friends, make sure to use ishoni.
それなのになぜか懐かしい気持ちばかりがするな。 いつも戦いを懐かしく感じるのは俺が子供の頃からずっと戦い続けているからかもしれない。
いつも always or usually. Another core piece of grammar that everyone must know is how to express always doing something or being a certain way. For example, you may have noticed that in this video I always talk about pizza. Pizza についていつも話します。Here, Ryu from Street Fighter is saying that he always feels nostalgic about fighting. いつも戦いを懐かしく感じる。So here it is a habitual thing that he always does. He always feels 懐かしい nostalgic about 戦い battle.
文字通り全ての終わりのことだ。しかし抗う術がないわけではない。
ではない to not be. Am not, is not, and are not. ではない is the formal way of expressing that something is not a certain way. 人間ではない is a formal way of saying that I am not human. Be aware that the particle combination here is では plus ない. So the は here is actually pronounced wa, just like the wa particle, because it's actually the wa particle that's being used here in this grammar point. And so here, Igor from Persona 5 is a formal speaking old man, and so he uses this style of speech here to say that it does not mean that it's the case, wake de wa nai, referring here to there being no means of resisting and that not being the case. Just like with de shou and daro, de wa nai is placed where you would usually put a des in a sentence. You could also make this more polite in addition to being formal by changing the nai in de wa nai to arimasen, making the polite formal way of saying something is to not be, so is not would be de wa arimasen.
男の子たちってみんな村を出てっちゃうね。
俺はみんなとは違う。ただ仕事を探すだけじゃない。
じゃない to not be casual. So here is the more casual form of ではない じゃない This is what you would use with your friends and family to avoid sounding too formal and uptight like Igor does, and more like a typical casual style of talking. Now this is exactly the same as de wa nai saying that it is not the case, just it's more casual. So here Cloud is saying that it's not that he was just looking for a job. ただ仕事を探すだけじゃない It is not that he was just looking for work.
なんだカラスか。
Ka, the question particle. Ka can be used at the end of a sentence to show a question, like, are you Japanese? 日本人ですか? Or even simply at the end of a sentence as a rhetorical question, like, huh, or as if, like seen here in Hideo Kojima's Snatcher. The main character here hears a strange noise and gets panicked, only to realize that it was only a crow. And so he says, Karasu-ka? A crow, huh? もう絶対あなたがサイファーだと思ったわ。か or ka can also be used mid-sentence to give a list of potential choices and possibilities. So we can see that in English, or is a perfect fit. Like here in Final Fantasy VIII, Quistis comes to the infirmary because she hears that one of her students was injured. Now, she knew that it would either be Squall or Cypher, and so here she says, Anata ka Cypher. I thought that it was going to be you or Cypher. Anata ka Cypher. So you can see that it's being used here between two nouns to say this or this.
こちら東京からいらしてる桐生さんです。
Kara, from. Next, we have how to express from in Japanese. So in English, when we say from England, we have from come first, from England. But in Japanese, it needs to follow the noun. So it would be igirisu kara, meaning from England. So here in the Yakuza series, we have the main character Kiryu being introduced, and his friend does this by telling the boss first where Kiryu is from. And so he says, Tokyo kara, from Tokyo. Kara can also be used just like the previous grammar point dakara that we learned previously, however you need to pay close attention to how it's conjugated differently. To express because or since with kara, when put after a verb or an adjective, simply add kara straight after. But if it's a noun or a na adjective, then you must use dakara. You cannot use kara with nouns and na adjectives, because you need to add this da after a noun or a na adjective.
ありがとうございます。それでは。
丁寧な話し方もできるんだな。
Kata, the way of doing something or how to do something. Now at first glance, this kanji might seem familiar. It's the same kanji from ho ga I. However, when used with the stem form of a verb, which is by removing the mus in a mus form verb, it is read as kata. And this shows the way of doing something or how to do that particular verb. So for example, tabemasu to eat would turn into tabekata, how someone eats, or even how to eat. So just like here from Cyberpunk 2077, V is surprised that his buddy can speak politely, and so he says, 丁寧な話し方もできるんだな. You can also talk in a polite way of speaking, huh? So way of speaking is hanashikata. Or here in the next example, 格闘家が聞いて飽きてるわ。もっとマシな戦い方はできないの? Cammy is wanting a better fighter and asks Guile if he can't do a little better way of fighting. もっとマシな戦い方はできないの? So 戦い方 here is the way of fighting.
なんだこの木は。とんでもない木が遠くから近づいてくる。
本当だ。すごいけど懐かしい木。
けど but or however. Here we have yet another way of expressing but in Japanese, but this time it is used particularly between two contradicting ideas. For example, 仕事は辛いけど楽しい. Usually, when something is tsurai, which means tough or difficult, it's not also fun, right? That's where this is contradicting, and this is why it calls for the use of kedo. So here, Gohan is surprised at this amazing unknown key appearing all of a sudden, and yet it somehow feels familiar. He wouldn't expect it to be familiar, and this is why it's a contradiction to what is normal, and so he uses kedo. これは5年前、現実にあった風景だ。けれども、きっとあの神羅屋敷から出てくるのは俺じゃない。けれども。Keredomo is now the more formal way of saying the same thing as kedo. You can remove the mo, turning it into keredo. However, the full keredomo is more polite. This next usage is interesting from a Final Fantasy VII fan's perspective, because we see Cloud all of a sudden speaking quite polite and formally. Perhaps this is a hint at his mind unraveling, but what is certain is that this keredomo is both a polite and formal way of saying but, like kedo. And so there are 3 different ways that you can say but or however, particularly used between 2 contradicting ideas. Starting from the lowest casual, you have kedo, then keredo, and then keredomo.
あのね、お花をお願いしたいんだけど。
任せて。どれぐらい?
Kurai and gurai. About or approximately. Both of these words mean the exact same thing, and while they do have some usage conventions, they are actually freely used interchangeably with each other. The first meaning here is used to express that something being around a certain amount. For example, at around 5 o'clock. Goji gurai ni. Or here, where Aerith is asking the lady how many flowers she wants, she says dore gurai. This is a set phrase for how much, but if we broke down the expression literally, we would see that the usage of gurai means about how many.
はあ？ピンチの時にヒーローが助けてくれるの、一度くらいは経験したいじゃない？
The next definition is used to express something being at least a certain way. So Tifa says to Cloud, wouldn't you like to experience it at least once? And so here we can see that kurai or gurai could be used, ichido kurai, at least once. Mother, still or not yet. This next example sentence perfectly represents the two different usages of mother. It can be used to express that something is not yet in a certain state. Here, the castle is being surrounded and it's falling to enemy troops, and the prince says it hasn't fallen yet. Mada, or simply not yet. And then he continues and says there is still a magic barrier. This second use of mother is actually showing that something is still a certain way. So the first example was not yet, and now it's still. So he is trying to reassure who he is speaking to that it's going to be okay because the magic barrier still exists. Mada aru. So you can use mada for both still or not yet.
この10年いろいろあった。お前はどこで何をしていた？
友との約束を果たしていた。まだ終わっていない。
Mada teimasen. The next evolution of mada here is with mada and then followed by a verb in the teimasen or teinai form. And this is used to express that an action has not yet been done, this time used solely with verbs. So if you're still waiting for that bus to come, you can say basu wa mada kiteimasen. Bus still hasn't come yet. Or if you are Oren and you still haven't finished fulfilling a promise to your friend, you could say like he says in Final Fantasy X, mada owatte nai. I'm not yet finished. Made, until, as far as, or to an extent. Made is a very versatile piece of grammar that can be used in quite a few different ways. It always follows a noun, and with it you can express things like gakko made, until school, ie made, as far as home, soko made, to there, and even namida made, to the point of tears. And so here in Tekken 7, Akuma has just defeated Heihachi, and he reflects on Heihachi's strength as a man, and he says, Kokomade no otoko ka. A man to this extent, huh? Kind of like saying, this is how strong you are, huh? So this is quite a diverse, useful, and a little bit tricky grammar point to get used to, but just keep in mind that it has these different definitions and they can be used in different contexts. So when you come across this, try and fit in one of these four and see which one fits best. Soju seki da. 目の前にタッチパネルが見えるだろ? 前に, before or in front of. This grammar is used mainly for two situations. The first one is to say that something happened before a certain time or event, like neru mae ni. This means before going to bed. Or it can be used to express being directly in front of something spatially, like in front of, just like here in Final Fantasy VIII, where a voice on the radio is asking Squall if he can see the touch panel that's in front of him. And so he says, 目の前にタッチパネルが見えるだろ? In front of your eyes, you can see a touch panel, right?
もうやっちまいませんか、兄貴。
Masenka, would you, do you want to, or shall we? This is a polite way of asking someone quite literally, won't you do X? And more commonly translated as shall we or do you want to? Now this is used to ask someone politely if they would like to do something, and so here one of these punks is asking their leader if they can kill this man from the Yakuza series. Mo yachimaemasen ka? Do you want to kill him now? Or shall we kill him already? And so here he is being polite to his senior and asking his boss if he wants to finish the job on this guy. To conjugate this form is very simple. Just put a verb in the negative must form, masen, and then just simply add ka to the end. So like iku to go would just be ikimasen ka? Shall we go? Or would you like to go?
もういいだろう、泉田。
やめましょう、泉田さん。送りに来てくれてありがとう。
Masho, let's, or shall we? Masho is actually the volitional form of must, to do, which is best explained as simply meaning a polite way of saying let's do something, masho. Let's study, benkyou shimashou. Or here, the lady is telling her friend that he should stop harassing this guy and just leave. And so she says, yamemashou, hey, let's stop, or shall we stop? 武器や道具について聞かせてあげましょうか? Masho ka. And so now this next evolution of masho is one step further. We're adding ka to the end. And this becomes a polite way to offer help to the listener. Like asking, shall I do something? Shall I take a photo for you? 写真を撮りましょうか? Or here in Chrono Trigger, when you go into the kind of help room at the beginning of the game, they ask you, shall I tell you about weapons and armor? 武器や防具について聞かせてあげましょうか?
あの時の雑魚か。来いよ、遊んでやる。
今回は油断も慢心もない。全力でお前を倒す。
Mo, to, also, or nor. Mo is another one of those really useful particles, this time replacing where a ga or wa might go in a sentence. And it makes it into to, or also, or with negatives, nor. For example, perhaps you like pizza. You would say, watashi mo pizza ga suki. I also like pizza. Or perhaps you found a friend who's also studying Japanese. You could say, watashi mo nihongo benkyou shiteru. I'm also studying Japanese. And it can even be used with negatives, like in this example from Dragon Ball FighterZ, where Yamcha says that this time there will be no carelessness nor arrogance within him. 今回は油断も慢心もnai. So mo is being used twice here, but it just means nor, it won't be. It's like the negative form of saying to or also.
Oyaji! 来るな、テオ。もう一度尋ねる。鏡はどこだ?
More. Next is a very similar sounding word, more. The u here is actually slightly more drawn out sounding than simply mo from the previous particle. This time, more means again or another. For example, if you didn't hear something, you could ask your friend to repeat what they just said. もう一度言ってください. Or like here in Shenmue, this man is saying that he in fact is going to ask Ryo's father one more time. もう一度尋ねる. It can also be used to say that something is already a certain way. もう9時だ. It's already 9 o'clock. So just make sure that you have that u sound at the end, otherwise it's just mo, and more.
もう我慢はしないっての。
More can also be used with negatives to say that you are no longer going to do that action anymore. Just like here in Persona 5,
もう我慢はしないっての。
I'm not going to put up with it anymore.
母さんやだよ母さん
Na adjectives. Now we have finally made it on to the second type of adjective. And if you remember, as I previously said, there were two different types, e adjectives and na adjectives. Here is that second type, an adjective ending in na. This type of adjective is actually much easier than the e adjectives to conjugate in a sentence, as they actually follow the exact same rules as nouns. So just like a noun, pen, des, it is a pen. Now, if we get a na adjective, for example, genki, you could say genki des. Genki means lively or energetic. So if you wanted to say that person is energetic, it would be その人は元気です. Or if you wanted to change the word order and put more emphasis on the person's characteristic, simply put the na adjective before the noun. Therefore, it's modifying that noun. For example, 彼は元気な人です. So here from Nino Kuni, we have iyada. This is a na adjective which means kind of detestable, unpleasant, or disagreeable. This is commonly seen used when just flat out refusing something or in an almost tantrum manner. Iyada, or even yada. But this is actually still a na adjective, and you can actually use it to describe something as well, like この嫌な気持ち, this unpleasant feeling. So we have the na adjective followed by a na, and then you have whatever you're modifying. So 嫌な気持ち means the unpleasant feeling. ところがある日、強烈なエネルギーを持つ謎の隕石が地球に落下してのである。Now this next example is from the opening of Rockman 8 or Mega Man 8, where the opening credits is explaining that a mysterious meteorite with intense energy has struck the Earth. 強烈なエネルギー, an intense energy. So first it is the na adjective followed by na, and then you have the noun. And this is adding more detail to the energy. So the energy is becoming 強烈なエネルギー. Intense energy. Don't do. Next is an incredibly simple grammar, but it's actually quite useful, at least for comprehension of media. So by putting na immediately after the dictionary form of a verb, you turn that verb into a kind of order to not do that action. 食べる to eat would be 食べるな, don't eat. But be careful, this is actually quite strong and direct, and it's actually a contraction of naide, a more polite way of asking someone not to do something, which we'll cover shortly. However, this is incredibly common in video games, in movies, in any kind of media, but it just might not be something that you might actually say to someone because it's a little bit strong, unless emergency called for it.
この道を通るのも3年ぶりか。懐かしいな。
Na. So here we have just like na, but it has that second ah, making it a little bit more like na. And this is a sentence ending particle, and it also shows confirmation or admiration and a lot of other emotions. Now this is not to be confused with the previous na, so just make sure it's na and na. This is often written with a small a afterwards. However, sometimes it's actually just na by itself. Now, this is very similar to ne in Japanese. This na can express a wide range of things, such as asking for confirmation from a listener, like right? And you can also express hope or admiration or even uncertainty. And you can also add emphasis to what is being said, like in this example from Valkyria Chronicle. So the main character has arrived back to his hometown after a long period away, and he says, "Natsukashii na." How nostalgic. So here he is expressing admiration at how it feels to finally be back in his hometown. Natsukashi is just nostalgic, but this natsukashi na is just like, it's so nostalgic, huh? This is a very useful sentence ender to add a wide range of emotions based on how you say it and what context it's being used in.
これで最後だよ。気を抜かないでいこう。せーの。
Naide, without doing. By putting a verb into the nai form and adding de, and then followed by another verb, you can express doing one verb without doing the second verb. So for example, コーヒーにはいつも砂糖を入れないで飲みます。I always drink coffee without putting in sugar. So you can see that putting in sugar is first, 砂糖を入れないで without putting in sugar, and then we have 飲みます, I drink. Take another example here from Final Fantasy VII, where after trying many times to correctly time this simultaneous button press, Tifa says, let's go without losing focus. 気を抜かないで行こう. So 気を抜く means to lose focus, so 気を抜かないで means without losing focus, and then 行こう let's go. と、まあこんな感じでさ、宿命のライバルだよね。まよいちゃん、その名前は口にしないで。ないで。Please don't. So this next usage of naide is what I mentioned previously about the na at the end of a word telling someone not to do something and that being a little bit too direct and strong. So here, naide is the more polite version of asking someone to not do something. Like in this example here where Naruhodo is asking Mayoi not to ever mention a particular person's name. Kuchi ni shinaide. Don't speak of that person. Now, if we were wanting to make this phrase even more polite, we would use ないでください。
お店が決めた順番を守るべきでは？
まあ、固いこと言わないでくださいよ。
Please don't. Now this is the highest of the three forms in N5 in terms of politeness in asking someone not to do something. Suruna, ordering someone not to do an action. Shinaide, asking someone not to do that action. And then shinaide kudasai, politely asking someone not to do that action. Here, in an example where a Yakuza member is actually being overly polite while actually being disrespectful as a kind of power move. And so he says to his customer at the girls' bar, "Hey, please don't say such uptight things. 固いこと言わないでください." Now, usually this phrase is actually really polite, but because he's using really polite language in the complete opposite situation, it changes the feeling to being almost dismissive and a power move. However, you can use this form without any concern. It is not rude at all. It is the highest level of politeness. It's just in Japanese that you can actually be overly polite, and it's actually kind of a way of talking down to someone.
何か良くないことが起きてる。脱出しないといけない。言ってることがわかるか？
ないといけない. You must do, or you have an obligation to do something. So we have seen how to express that you must not do something with じゃいけない, and now we have the other side, expressing that you must do something with ないといけない. So the literal translation for じゃいけない means that if you do something, then it's no good. And that's why it means must not. However, this ないといけない actually means if you don't do something, then it's no good. meaning that you must do that action. And so the same rules apply as before, where you can change ikenai to dame to make it more casual, and this time you can even drop it all together and just use naito if you want to be really short and casual. So in this example from The Last of Us, as the world starts to go crazy, Joel takes his daughter and tells her that they need to get out of town fast. 脱出しないといけない. Meaning that we have to evacuate. There is no choice. It's literally that if they don't get out, bad things are about to happen, and so they must escape. 脱出しないといけない. 今はお金がないからスラムに住んでるけど、いつかは本で見たようなおしゃれな部屋に住んでやるつもりだ。などと書いてみたが、そのためにまず仕事を見つけなくちゃいけない。なくてはいけない. You must do. This is a very formal expression that is actually slightly higher level than N5. However, I've included it as it helps explain the grammar that's being used in this next example. So we have Nakcha Ikenai. Nakcha Ikenai is a contraction of Naktewa Ikenai. However, we don't usually say Naktewa Ikenai. It's quite formal in small written language. However, this spoken language, Nakcha Ikenai, is a more casual contraction of this formal language, and it's much more widely used. So naktewa contracts to nakcha, and then ikenai can contract into the more casual dame, or just stay as ikenai. They can both be interchanged. So we can see here in the example from Final Fantasy VII, where Cloud is telling the story of the events that happened 5 years ago, and he reads a letter that he wrote to Tifa saying that he has to find a job. Shigoto o mitsukenakcha ikenai. So this is a casual expression that shows the subjective view of needing to do something. You feel that it's something you must do, and it's based on your own decision.
わしは長門ペインを止めなくてはならない。
なくてはならない. Another way of expressing must do here, this time replacing ikenai with naranai. So the core meaning of ikenai is a kind of subjective view that something is not good. However, with naranai, its core meaning is that it is objectively bad, and there's this sense of obligation to either the rule or society that an action must be done. And so here being used rather fittingly in a clip where Jiraiya has realized that Nagato is pain, and he is perhaps the greatest threat to peace and stability in the ninja world, and so he feels this sense of obligation to stop him. And so he says, pain o tomenakute wa naranai. I must stop pain.
おう、じゃあ僕らの王様は
レポート探しに旅立ったかもね。
早く追いかけなくっちゃ。
And now finally we have the most casual version here to say to must do, and so all the way from naktewa ikenai all the way down to just nakcha. So this is the complete contracted with all of the ikenai dropped off. It is just the most casual form. And so we see here in Kingdom Hearts, Goofy says that he needs to quickly catch up to the king who's gone on this journey, and so he says hayaku oikake nakcha. And so just remember that this nakcha is the contracted form of naktewa, but in spoken speech we use this nakcha to speak more casually. Kind of like a we gotta do it in English.
アフガンの砂漠に埋葬されるか。もって2週間だ。ミラーがやらなくてもいい仕事だった。
Nakutemo ii. You don't have to. So perhaps you've had enough of all of this obligation. This next grammar point is perfect for you. Nakute-ii or nakutemo-ii is used to express that you don't need to do a certain action. So if we were to use the previous example, hitori de iku, to go alone, here the conjugation would be hitori de ikanakutemo ii. you don't have to go alone. So it's really simple. Just put the verb in the nai form and then add kute mo I. And you can even drop the mo to make it slightly more casual, like seen here in the example from Metal Gear Solid 5, where Ocelot is telling Snake that the job Miller was sent to do, he didn't have to do it. Yaranakute mo ii shigoto datta. It was a job that he didn't need to do. So yaranakute mo ii means you don't have to do it. Feza ga nakama ni natta. Ni naru, to become. Now for something completely different. We have the particle ni plus naru, to mean to become something. This is a really useful expression for showing almost anything becoming something. You just became an adult, otona ni natta. You want to become a millionaire, okanemochi ni naritai. Here from Suikoden 2, when a party member joins your army, you have their name followed by nakama ni natta, meaning that the person became a member of your group. So that works fine with nouns and na adjectives, but what about e adjectives? Well, you may have guessed already, but just like before, the e adjective is a little bit different. So let's get into some examples to understand more. Tsuyoi. This is the e adjective for strong. So if you want to say to become strong, then you need to put the e adjective into this ku form, so tsuyoku, just like we do for adverb conversion, and then straight into naru. So to become stronger would be moto tsuyoku naru. And so this next example from Final Fantasy VII is perfect at showing both ways of conjugating naru. At the Chocobo farm, Choco Billy is explaining that if you use the greens, they will make the Chocobos become really focused and actually become more difficult for them to run away from you. And so here we see muchu ni natte, become absorbed in something, and then nige nikui, meaning difficult to run. Nikui is an e adjective, which means difficult to do something, and so becoming difficult to run away would be nige nikuku naru. So you can see that both the noun and na adjective way of conjugating this is by adding ni naru to nouns and na adjectives, and for e adjectives, turning the adjective into ku naru. So for example, oishii, delicious, oishiku naru.
そんなに上司様は偉いのですか?
No desu, to explain something and to show emphasis. This next piece of grammar may perhaps be the most confusing piece of grammar that is actually incredibly simple, but it just doesn't get explained clearly enough in certain textbooks, leaving students feeling not very confident in how to actually use this no desu. No desu is used when you're talking about a reason or a fact or explanations as to why something is a certain way. Adding this to a sentence simply shows that what you're talking about now feels like the focus is that you're really talking about the reasons, the facts, or the explanations on that matter. So let's take this really simple statement. Muzukashii desu. It's difficult. And then muzukashii no desu. It's difficult, but this time with the no desu grammar. So the first example is simply stating something is the case. It's difficult. End of story. That's all. However, the no desu version is not only stating that fact, but it's also adding more emphasis, as the speaker might be actually answering or asking a question or explaining their feeling. So like saying, it's so difficult. Showing a reason for something. Maybe there's a reason why you're complaining or feeling bad. It's because it's difficult. Muzukashii no desu. So it's used here to show that reasoning. So here in this example from Ryuga Gotoku Isshin, a Japanese-only released Yakuza game that retells the story of Ryoma Sakamoto in the Bakamatsu era in Japanese history. In this time period, there was a very strict samurai class system that made this group of people called Joshi on an incredibly higher social status than the rest of the common folk. And so here, this girl is questioning that status quo as to whether these these joshi are actually really that grand and special. And so she says, そんなにjoshi様は偉いのですか? She is questioning the explanation or fact about these joshi being erai, which means grand or special. この谷の向こうにその聖地があるんだな。です。There is also a casual form of this grammar point for no des, simply contracting the no to So here, the character Zidane from Final Fantasy IX is kind of spinning the cogs in his head, and he's reflecting on the fact that these holy grounds that they were searching for is just over this valley. And so he's focusing on the fact that just over here is this place. He isn't simply stating that it exists, he's also reflecting on the facts that maybe he'd heard previously about the holy ground, and so he's kind of looking at the reasoning or the explanation of something. So kind of like, so it is that over these hills are the holy grounds.
これで完了だな。
ありがとう。クラウド、7番街行くんだよね。
Ne, isn't it, right? Or So the particle ne is a sentence-ending particle that is used to confirm something with someone. It's very similar to right, or don't you think so? Or So as the previously covered na can be used with yourself when you're kind of reflecting on something, like natsukashi na, here ne differs because this is more about confirming something, like oishii ne, it's delicious, right? Or natsukashi ne, it's natsukashi, it's nostalgic, right? So the core of this language is confirming with someone else and including people in your conversation. It generates additional dialogue. And so here, Aerith asks Cloud, Cloud, you're going to see Sector 7, right? And this right comes from ne. If you didn't have ne in this sentence, it would feel like Aerith is actually explaining to Cloud what he's about to do. However, because she's put ne here, it actually kind of makes it more like a soft question.
どこにいたんですか？
俺は今店に入ってきたとこや。
Ni, the destination particle. In, at, on, and to. The next particle we have in N5 is the ni particle. Its usages are quite diverse, and so it is an incredibly important piece of grammar to become familiar with. These 4 different definitions give quite different meanings to each one of their sentences. In is expressing within a confined space doing a certain action. For example, Kyoto ni sundeimasu. I am living in Kyoto. So Kyoto is the area in which I live. Or sanji ni nemasu. I sleep at 3 o'clock. So now we have the definition at a certain point in time. Ni can also be used to express where objects are. For example, kohi ga teburu no ue ni aru. The coffee is on the table. And finally, to. We can use ni to show the direction in which we take an action. For example, Nihon ni iku. Go to Japan. Okay, so first let's look at this example from Yakuza. Here we have a blind woman that was surprised by this Yakuza who just suddenly appeared at her shop. She accidentally bumped into him. So she catches him and asks why was he in there, and he says that he just came into the shop. Mise ni haite kita tokoro. So the ni is showing where he haite kita, where he entered. So the noun before ni is showing that location. Mise or shop. In this next example from Ghost of Tsushima, 2 people are sitting atop a hilltop and they're planning their attack. And they say that they will jump in the moment this gate is opened. And so here, ni is used to show the time that this action, tobikomu, takes place. And so, mon o hiraita setsuna, the instant the gate opens.
あなたの名もここに。わしの教えを猛虎に売ったということか。
Also, from the same game, after sneaking into the camp, you can find some scrolls that have been sold to the Mongols. And so here we show a direction of that verb happening. Moko ni utta. Sold to the Mongol.
他の場所に行く時間はない。
じゃあここで焼いた方が安全だぞ。
カイラリウムが都市に被害を与える。ここはダメだ。
今から焼却所へ行く方が危険だ。
Ni and e. So when expressing the direction that something takes place, you can also use e instead of ni to be very specific about the direction. Ni refers to the point of location, but e is more focused on the direction. So here, from Death Stranding, they are trying to decide how to deal with this body that they want to burn. However, it's too dangerous to go to the incinerator, and so he says shōkyakusho, meaning incinerator, and then e, showing the direction to that place. Iku ho ga kiken means it's more dangerous to go. So, going in that direction of the incinerator is more dangerous than any other option. And so the big thing here is just e is focused about direction, but ni is focused about the actual point of location.
ありがとうございます。
Ni iku. Another very useful expression using the ni particle is ni iku. This means to go and do a certain verb. Here, you need to turn the first verb into the verb stem. So, kaimasu turning into kai, and then ni iku, turning kaimasu, shopping, into kai ni iku, to go to do shopping. Or here in Octopath Traveler, you can see futari de, with two people, miwari ni, on our rounds, ittekimasu, we will go. So we will go together to do our rounds.
セシル、一体何があったの？急にミシリアへ行ったかと思えば、今度は厳重討伐に行くなんて。
Now you can actually also use ni iku with certain nouns that contain action to express that you are going to do that noun. Now, this I have not been able to find in any standard textbook, however it is actually true. You can use it with certain nouns that take on the suru form. However, not all nouns can be used. So you must be very careful because there are no hard and fast rules as to which nouns of action you can use with ni iku and which you can't. For example, you can say ski ni iku, to go skiing. You can say kaimono ni iku, to go shopping. You can say ryoko ni iku, to go to travel. These are all nouns, but you cannot say saka ni iku, to go soccer or go to do soccer. And you can't say sportsu ni iku, to go do sports. You cannot say that is incorrect. So a good idea is to make sure that you've actually seen the noun of action in use before trying to use it yourself, or a nice little cheat around this is any noun of action which can also be turned into a suru verb. For example, kaimono, kaimono suru, ryoko, ryoko suru, or even saka, saka suru. Simply add shi ni iku after the noun, and now you are completely worry-free. You can now use this with any noun that can also be used with suru if you just add shi ni iku. So you can gemu shi ni iku and saka shi ni iku all day long. もし僕らが生き延びて、でも離れ離れになってしまったら、その時はここに戻ってくることにしよう。にする。To decide to or to decide on. This final use of ni in the N5 grammar is ni suru, to decide on something or to decide to do something. Now, you can use this when you're at a cafe or a restaurant, when you're asked what you'll have to drink, for example, nomimono wa nani ni suru? You can reply back with the same grammar, kohi ni suru. I'll have a coffee, or literally, I will decide on the coffee. You can also use ni suru to show what you decide to do. Like this iconic scene from Suikoden 2 where the two best friends, Ryo and Joey, are about to jump off a cliff together to save their lives. And they decide on meeting back here at this place in case anything goes wrong. This is expressed here with koko ni. To here, modotte kuru koto, the thing of returning back, ni shio. Let's decide on. And so you can see that this grammar pattern is very useful for showing your intentions on choosing to decide a certain thing or action. お父さんが死んだ翌日、俺は父さんの部屋で俺への手紙を見つけた。No. The possessive particle. Another incredibly useful particle is the no particle. This first usage is used when you want to express ownership or possession of one noun to another. Like for example, my pizza, ore no pizza, or his bike, kare no bike. So here in Ninja Gaiden we have Tousan no heya de, in father's room. So the first noun is usually the one that has the ownership or possession of that second noun. A common translation you will see is this s, like father's room. That s is the no particle.
それが若のおふくろさんすか。
慌てんな。俺が心底惚れてたのは別の女だ。茜と言った。
No. The verb nominalizer. The no particle is also incredibly useful for this cool sounding action, nominalizing verbs, which just means turning verbs into nouns. This is really useful because then we can talk about verbs as objects or topics rather than just actions that you do. Think of it kind of like ing in English. I like walk is incorrect, you just can't say that. But I like walking, you can. And it's just like this in Japanese. If you say sanpo suru ga suki, it's just incorrect. You need this ing, and so you need the no particle to turn that verb into a noun. And so you would say sanpo suru no ga suki. It can also be used to express the thing or one that is the target of the verb. For example, tabeta no wa, the one that I ate, the thing that I ate, pizza da, is pizza. Or like here in Yakuza 7, shinsoko horeteta no wa betsu no onna da. The one that I was in love with from the bottom of my heart was a different woman. So we have this horeteta no wa, the one that I loved. Betsu no onna da, it was a different woman. Mada denki o tameru no ga heta. No ga heta, to be bad doing something. Once you know how to nominalize a verb into a noun, you can now use these next few phrases to talk about describing more information about doing that action. Here, you can express being bad at doing a certain action. So just like before, you add the no to a verb. Like in this example from Elekid's Pokédex entry. Denki o tameru no ga heta. Denki is electricity, denki o tameru means storing electricity, and then we have no ga heta means doing that he is bad at. So he's bad at storing electricity. Or a more natural way would just to say that he's not good at storing electricity. You can also use this in a positive sense with no ga jozu, to be good at something. バタ足だけでも太平洋を横断できるほど泳ぐのが上手だ。So just like how heta says what you're bad at, jozu says what you're good at. This is actually used to describe another's action, as it contains slight connotations of praise. So if you use it with yourself, you will sound a little bit cocky, like you're complimenting yourself, and it's usually only used in a kind of jokingly brag, if you're gonna use it about yourself. But for speaking for others, it is completely normal and very widely used. Perhaps you have been Nihongo ga jozu already, or perhaps that day is still to come. So here, the example we have is talking of Polyraph's ability to swim in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. And so we have oyogu, meaning to swim, no ga jozu. He is good at swimming. If you are wanting to talk about your own skills in a more listing and less braggy manner, you could do this with the higher level grammar tokui instead of jozu.
お待たせ。
エアリスなのか。
うん。コルネオはこういうのが好きなんだって。
No ga ski. We can also use this pattern no ga with ski, meaning to like, to show what you like doing. So if you like studying Japanese, you could say 勉強するのが好き. Or you could simply drop the no and talk about nouns that you like with ga ski. Like I have already mentioned many times in this video about my love for pizza, pizza ga ski, or even pizza ga daisuki. I like or even love pizza. Now in this example, Aerith is talking about Don Corneo's tastes in dresses, referring to what she is wearing, saying that he likes this kind of thing. Koiyu no ga suki. Koiyu no ga, things like this is what he, suki, likes.
先生方にお知らせします。ただいまより TT 職員会議を行いますので、至急職員室までお戻りください。
No de, because of, given that, and since. This grammar is used to explain a reason or reasoning for an action. The reason is given before no de, with the new action after. For example, 雨が降っていたので、試合が中止になりました. So the first part is explaining the reason why the second part happens. So, given that it was raining, 雨が降っていたので, the match was cancelled. 試合が中止になりました. This is more formal than kata, and it's also very focused on explaining the reasoning. And so when you see no de, think about it explaining the reasoning of something. Just like in this example from Persona 4, given that there will be an emergency staff meeting, 緊急職員会議を行いますので, please return to the staff room as soon as possible. 職員室までお戻りください. This is a formal announcement made to all of the staff in the school that explains the reasoning why the teachers are to return to the staff room immediately. It's because there's an emergency staff meeting. And so think of this like the strongest form of showing because. You're really explaining the reasoning for an action and really getting deep into it. Or the polite marker or honorific prefix. So the honorifics o and go are incredibly common and widely used in all Japanese that adds a level of politeness and honorifics to a word that you are using. Now this can make words more respectful, more refined, or even just a part of a word by itself. It just is that way. But often understanding the difference between the two can cause nightmares for some students. The standard rule for o is that if a word uses the kun yomi reading, which is the Japanese reading for a kanji, that means it appears in hiragana in your dictionary, then it generally uses the o prefix. Take for example the following words: o tearai, o hanashi, o nigiri. All of these words use the o in front of the word to make the word more polite. Tearai is just a little rough, but o tearai is a very polite way of referring to the toilet. And as you can see, each example uses the kunyomi or Japanese reading. Tearao, hanasu, and nigiru are all Japanese words. Remember, you can see this by it being written in hiragana in the kanji readings for the kanji. So in this example where Gohan is seeing his father turn Super Saiyan for the very first time, he is surprised that it is his father, and so he asks, "Father? Otosan?" Note that Tosan is the kunyomi or Japanese reading for this kanji, Tosan, where the Chinese or onyomi would actually be fu. That's how you read this kanji. The first one there is actually fu, not Tosan. So Gohan is a polite boy, and so he is politely referring to his father when in shock seeing him turn into a Super Saiyan using the o prefix before Tosan.
何者だ?
とっくにご存知なんだろう?
And so next is go, the other honorific prefix that is mostly used before onyomi or Chinese readings of words. And so just like what I said for the kunyomi readings, if you want to find out if a word is kunyomi or onyomi, the reading, then all you need to do is look at the dictionary and it should be written in either hiragana or katakana. If it's written in katakana, that means it kind of has an element of foreignness to it, and that means it's a Chinese origin word. And that also means that you're highly likely to be able to use go in front of it to make that word more honorific. Like for example, go kazoku, or go iken, or go rendaku. If you look up any of these words in the dictionary, you will see that they all begin with the onyomi reading. Ka for kazoku, I for iken, ren for rendaku are all the Chinese origin or onyomi readings. By using the go honorific prefix in front of these words, you are speaking of someone else's action or thing in a very respectful and honorific manner. Take for example, kazoku, family. It's just the plain word for family. There's nothing polite about it at all. But if you add go kazoku, it turns it into something like your honorable family. And this language is actually far more useful than you might think, especially in Japanese society where being polite is incredibly important. If you were to talk about someone else's family, especially with someone that you're not close with, you would want to use this go kazoku to be as polite as possible, referring to their family. And so seen used here in Persona 4, where Igor says, Igor speaks in a very formal manner, and so it's appropriate that he uses go in front of Shokai for introduction, to mean in a way something like thy honorable introduction. So he makes the action of introducing more respectful and honorific by adding go before it. In another example from Dragon Ball Z, we see Goku using gozonji, the honorific way of saying to know something. Now, Goku here is actually doing this after gaining a huge power advantage over Frieza, who just killed his best friend. And so he's using this incredibly formal and honorific language as a kind of power move. He is so above Frieza right now that he belittles him by speaking to him arrogantly in the most polite way he can. Now, normally this would be actually a really polite thing to do, but Goku is doing it on purpose to actually make him more distant from Frieza. Also, Goku's normal way of speaking is kind of a little bit country hickish. He doesn't really use keigo and the really polite language, so the fact that he's doing it right now when he goes Super Saiyan is also adding that emphasis that he's like a different guy right now. So as I said before, this rule is the standard rule, but that does not mean that it applies 100% of the time. It is the general rule for how to use these prefixes, and for the most part, it is correct. However, there are certain exceptions, and I could probably make an entire textbook just on explaining the usages of these two, o and go, and so I've kept it short and simple for this video. But if you follow that hiragana and katakana, you will be correct 9 times out of 10. ドジで間抜けドンキーコングは捕まえた。返して欲しけりゃバナナをよこせ。お、 the object marker, pronounced as o, but actually written as wo. The most simplest and easiest way of explaining this is to think of the object in a sentence as something that is the target of the verb in that sentence. For example, pizza o taberu. Taberu is the action, the verb to eat. O shows exactly what I eat. So, what do I eat? Pizza. Pizza o taberu. So the word that comes before o is what I'm doing that verb to. And so really, in whatever situation you would like, whatever is the target of the verb, you can mark it by using the o particle after that noun. Throw a ball, boru o nageru. Or like here in Donkey Kong Country 2, hand over the bananas would be banana o yokose. Yokosu meaning to hand over. What are you handing over? Find the o particle to find out. Bananas.
オースラ
殿下、自分に時間をください。我々の力だけでは国を取り戻せません。
O kudasai. Please give me. So this next grammar pattern actually uses the o object marker followed by kudasai, meaning please. So we can already tell just by what we've already learned previously that you are asking for an object politely. And that's exactly how this is used. Whenever you want to politely ask for something, just put that noun in front of o kudasai and you're done. So like here from Final Fantasy XII, Vossler asks Ash for some more time. Jikan o kudasai. Please give me some more time. And so you can see that the object doesn't need to actually be a physical object like bananas, but it also works with abstract things like time. Just remember here that grammatically speaking, the object marker means showing the target of the verb. 封印は二度と解かれることはないはずでした。しかし、それらの出来事が伝説となった頃。しかし、but or however. So we have previously learned that demo is the casual way to say but or however in Japanese. And demo can be used at the beginning or middle of the sentence with commas. However, shikashi is the more formal and often written way of expressing the same thing, and this form must be at the beginning of a new sentence. So, 京都は大好きです。しかし、京都の夏がとても暑いです。I love Kyoto. Full stop. End of sentence. However, Kyoto's summer is very hot. It's not usually used in spoken language unless it's for some kind of dramatic effect, but it may be used in narration in telling a story for that very effect, like seen here in the opening of Zelda for the Super Nintendo. Here, the story is being told that this seal keeping Ganon at bay was expected to have never been broken again. However, しかし、それらの出来事が伝説となった。That's when these events all became that of legend. So the narrator here is telling the story in a very dramatic way, and so しかし here fits more than demo would. However, for your normal conversation when you're talking with friends or family, you would probably use something else, not necessarily しかし, unless you're wanting to get that dramatic effect.
新たなる時代、新たなる悪。獣を処分するのはそれからでも遅くはない。
それから and then, after that, and since then. Literally meaning from that. それ meaning that, から meaning from, or after that. It's one of the two ways in N5 Japanese to introduce additional information in a sentence. For example, I ate pizza. Pizza o tabemashita. Okay, great, but what next? それから and then I watched a movie. 映画を見ました. So it refers to a previous action and then it continues the story with a separate action. These actions take place independently of each other. Like seen here in Ultra Street Fighter 4, Seth talks about his plans at becoming the ultimate power, and so first he needs to do something. But even after that, それからでも, it won't be too late to beat Juri. So you can see that these two events aren't necessarily closely linked, but he is adding additional information to the story that he's telling. 大戦すべてを焼く尽くした。その戦いが終わった時、世界から魔法という力が消え去った。そして1000年、鉄、火薬、蒸気機関、人々は機械の力を使い、世界を蘇らせた。そして another way of expressing the same thing as それから and can often be used interchangeably is そして. However, just note that それから is more focused on the continuation of events after the previous, so the first event and then after that, the next event occurs. The two events are more independent of each other. However, with そして, it's more like and. So I did this and then this. そして and then this. It's more continuous than それから in terms of storytelling, and it keeps the actions feeling like they are actually continuing and connected together. And so here in Final Fantasy VI, this そして is used to keep the story events feeling related and close together. The power of magic disappeared from the world. 魔法という力が消え去った。And then, そして for 1,000 years, people used the power of machines to bring the world back to life. So the two events here feel very connected to one another thanks to そして。
それを逆に利用して奴を呼び出す。
ちょっと待ってよ。オロチマルを復活させるなんて危険すぎるって。
すぎる。Too much. This next grammar sugiru is used to express when something is just too much. You can use it with verbs and adjectives. For verbs, simply put them in the mas stem and remove the mas, also known as the verb stem. So tabemasu turning into tabe, and then simply add sugiru, tabe sugiru. So if you wanted to say I ate too much, it would be tabe sugita. You can also put them with e and na adjectives. You just need to remove the last e or remove the na and then add sugiru. So, atsui for hot turning into atsu sugiru. Or kantan na for being simple, just kantan sugiru. So here in this example from Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Storm, this character is saying that it's too dangerous to do something, here seen with kiken sugiru. Kiken is another na adjective, but the na has been removed, and then add sugiru at the end to show that something is too dangerous. Kiken sugiru.
やべえ、俺天才すぎんだろ。
You may also see this grammar point being contracted in the Kansai dialect, like seen here in Persona 5, where the character speaks in a dialect from the Kansai region in Japan, like Osaka and Kyoto. And so when speaking in this dialect, the sugiru actually turns into sugin. Now it's actually quite often in Japanese media to usually include someone in the cast from the Kansai region in that work, as it adds this element of flavor to the character, and it often has a connection to the huge comedy scene that stems from Osaka, which heavily uses this dialect of speaking. And so a lot of people, most people in Japan, are somewhat familiar with the Kansai dialect, even if they don't live there. おい、このビルには詳しいんだろ？知らない。そういえば本社に来るのは初めてだ。前に聞いたことあるぜ。たことがある。To have done something before. So here we have an expression where we can show that we have done a certain verb sometime in the past before now. To do this, we simply first need to put whatever verb we want to use in the plain past form. For example, to go, iku being itta. And then we attach koto ga aru. Literally, the thing of doing it exists. So here, the thing or experience of going somewhere exists. Itta koto ga aru. So, have you been to Japan? You could say Nihon ni itta koto ga aru. I have been to Japan. And so here in Final Fantasy VII, where the group is about to enter the Shinra headquarters, the group asks if anyone knows anything about this place. And Barrett responds with, Mae ni kita koto ga aru ze. I have heard about it before. So this kita is the past form of kiku, to hear. So, I have heard about it. 聞いたことがある。
こんなの映画でしか見たことない。
たことがない to have never done something before. And so next is the complete opposite. If you have never done something, you can simply change aru from the previous grammar into nai, meaning to not exist, turning the expression into you have never done that verb before. So here from 13 Sentinels, this girl says that she has never seen a thing like this except for in the movies. Mita koto nai, meaning have never seen. And we can also see in this example sentence that the ga particle can be dropped if you want to speak casually. This works for the previous example as well. So ta koto aru or ta koto nai is an acceptable way of using these expressions casually, as particles are often dropped in casual speech in Japanese. However, the official, polite, and correct way of speaking is ta koto ga aru or ta koto ga nai.
小村には行きたいとこがあるんだ。その気持ちをお前に閉じ込められてたまるか。
Tai, want to do something. This next grammar point is really simple and really easy to use. Simply put whatever verb you want to do in the verb stem. So I want to see, mimasu turns into mitai. Now this is usually only used in the first person when you're talking about yourself, something you want to do, but it can be used to talk about others if you're doing something like quoting what they said. So in this example from Xenoblade 2, Rex is telling the enemy that he won't let them do what they want because Homura has a place she wants to go. Now this is information that he heard from her previously, and he's relaying that information to the enemy, where he says, "Ikitai tokoro ga arunda." She has a place that she wants to go. 我々人間はポケモンと仲良く暮らしている。一緒に遊んだり、力を合わせて仕事をしたり、そしてポケモン同士を戦わせ、絆を含めていったり。Tari, tari. Do things like A and B. So tari is a useful way of giving a list of various things. It's best thought of as meaning things like. It can be used with verbs, nouns, and adjectives. For verbs, simply put them in the past form and then add ri. So, kaimono shita, I shopped, into kaimono shitari. I did things like shopping. For nouns and na adjectives, simply add dattari after the noun or adjective. So, pizza dattari means things like pizza, or hima dattari means things like being free. And with e adjectives, you want to remove that final e and add kattari. So, being stuff like busy would be isogashikattari. So in this example from Pokemon Heart Gold, we can see it being used numerous times in one sentence. So Professor Oak is listing all of these different things that we can do with Pokemon. Issho ni asondari. We can do things like play together. Shigoto o shitari. We do things like work. And even kizuna o fukumete ittari. Do things like go to deepen our bonds.
これをやっとかないと起動した途端に気分が悪くなったり吐く可能性もあるから。
And so you can list all of the verbs that you can do things like this, this, and this. However, you can also use it just by itself in a sentence to simply mean things like the certain verb, and you only need to use one. So here from Cyberpunk 2077, Judy is saying that by doing this brain dance, you can do things like kind of make you feel sick. Here expressed with kibun ga waruku nattari. Things like feeling unwell. Here, it's only used once, but it still holds that feeling of perhaps there might be more things that it does, it just hasn't been listed yet, because tari gives a list of things. キスティス先生をリストに加えろ。あのリスト何が書いてあるんだ？てある is or has been done. By putting a verb in the te form followed by aru, it makes it feel like something is done intentionally and you can see the resulting state of that action. It's similar to using the past tense form, but it's different in that it places emphasis on the action being done intentionally and that end result is still being visible. So, like here in Final Fantasy VIII, Squall wonders what's been written on this list of ciphers, and he says, "Nani ga kaite arunda?" What is it that has been written? So here he's emphasizing the action of writing and also the result that's still visible on his list. What has been written? You could just say, "Nani o kaita?" What did he write? But this sentence is only focused on the action itself. Nani o kaita? What did you write? That's it. Rather than the resulting state of what has been written, like with te aru. So another example could be doa o aketa. I opened the door, so it refers to the action. But if you want to refer to the state, you could say doa ga akete aru. The door is open. You are now referring to that resulting state of the door being open.
志村様が探してる。
ている, an ongoing action or current state. This is the progressive tense of a verb, which shows that something is currently happening or ongoing. Like 勉強する, to study, 勉強している means I am studying. It is a present and ongoing action. This grammar point is incredibly useful to express something similar to ing in English, where you are showing something occurring presently. So this example from Ghost of Tsushima, where Shimura-sama is looking for you, this ing is expressed with sagashite iru, currently searching. Now this example sentence is actually very simple and it only states Shimura-sama is searching. It doesn't clearly state what for or who of, it's just saying that he is searching. However, it is understood through context that he is looking for the guy that's being spoken to. As is quite common in Japanese, you have to read things through context.
僕全然覚えてないや。なんで？
大きくなってから初めて会ったからね。
てから after or since. This next grammar point that's used with the te form of verbs is te kara. If you remember that kara means from, so you could think of it as literally meaning from doing the verb. Or put in other words, since doing that verb. The two most common meanings are either after or since. For example, after I studied, 勉強してから I slept, 寝ました. So it shows that after I did the first verb, I did the next verb. Or like in this example from Boku no Natsuyasumi, we have 大きくなってから since you grew up, this is the first time we have met, 初めて会った. So you can see that te kara can be used for expressing after doing one verb, you do another one, or since doing a certain verb. Just make sure to put that verb in the te form when you're doing this, because if you put it in any other form, it changes the meaning greatly. Te kudasai. Please do. So similar to o kudasai, when you ask politely for an object, te kudasai is now asking politely for someone to do a verb, because the te is the te form of the verb. Perhaps one of the earliest Japanese expressions that people learn in their textbooks is chotto matte kudasai. Please wait a little bit. So here, matsu means to wait, and chotto is a little. So put the verb in the te form, matte, followed by kudasai, please do, please wait, matte kudasai. Here in 13 Sentinels, a voiced announcement is asking residents to follow police instructions politely. And so here, shitagao means to obey or follow, making shitagatte kudasai, meaning please obey or please follow the police's guidance. Keisatsu no yudo. So if you want to ask anyone to do a verb, you simply put the verb into the te form, followed by kudasai.
そうだ、それでいい。
基本は格闘だ。武器や装備に頼ってはいけない。
てはいけない. You must not. Now we have finally made it to that te wa ikenai that I mentioned at the very beginning of this video. So we saw the casual version of this with cha ikenai in the very first grammar point, but this is that non-contracted version to say that you must not do something. This is much more formal than cha ikenai, and here it's being used by the mentally unstable cyborg ninja from Metal Gear Solid. Here he says, "Buki ya soubi ni tayotte wa ikenai." You cannot rely on equipments and weapons. So you could make this form even politer by changing that nai to masen. So an incredibly polite and formal way of saying that you must not do something would actually be verb te wa ikemasen. 必ず助けてあげてね、ジタンさん。呼び捨てしてくれていいぜ。よー、ジタンって感じでな。わかったよ、ジタン。てもいい。It's okay to. Now, if we were wanting to just give or ask for permission to do something, like is it okay, we use temoi in Japanese. This can be used with verbs, nouns, and adjectives. You just need to put them in the te form and then add more i. So, taberu, to eat. You want to ask if it's okay to eat, just say tabete mo ii. Or with nouns, you add demo i. Like in what do you want to eat? Pizza is okay, pizza demo i. So you turn the temo into demo for nouns. And with adjectives, the same conjugation rules apply as we've seen many times before. E adjectives drop the last E and replace with kute, and then na adjectives function exactly the same as nouns. So for example, takai for expensive. If you wanted to say it's okay even if it's expensive, maybe you're going shopping, you don't care about the price, you would say takakute mo ii. Even if it's expensive, it's okay. Now you can also drop that mo if you want to speak more casually, which is exactly what's happening here in the example from Final Fantasy IX, where Zidane tells Vivi that it's okay to not refer to him with these san suffixes in his name, as it's just too formal for their relationship and he wants him to chill out. And so he says, "Yobiste ni shite kurete ize." It's okay to drop the formalities for me. So yobiste is removing all of those suffixes that you put at the end of the name. So Zidane's son, just get rid of that. Yobiste, throw it away. And then we have ni shite kurete means that you can do it for me. It's okay.
ようこそお初にお目にかかる。ここは夢と現実、精神と物質の狭間にある場所。
To and. This particle has three quite distinctive uses at the N5 level that are all very useful and widely used. The first is simply used quite like and in English. However, to is quite definitive. So if you say I like pizza and pasta, pizza to pasta ga suki, you really are saying that those two things are what you like. You are not mentioning anything else or even the possibility of anything else. You're just saying very definitively those are the two things you like. Like here in Persona 5, Igor again here is describing the place that you're in. It's the place that exists between dream and reality. Yume to genjitsu. Spirit and matter. Seishin to bushitsu. So with this use of to, he is very definitively describing what this room is. And it has to do with these four things that he mentioned and four things only.
今日から学校でしょ？途中まで同じ道だから一緒に行こう。
To can also be used to express doing something with someone. Like for example, going somewhere with friends. You would say tomodachi to ishoni iku. Go together with friends. And so that's exactly what's going on here in Persona 4, where Nanako suggests that you go to school together with her, and so this with is that to particle, and that's what you decide on doing, and so you say Nanako to ishoni. That's together with Nanako.
私がなぜリボルバーと呼ばれているかじっくりと味わわせてやる。
To can also be lastly used as a kind of quote for something, and it can describe, for example, how someone is cold. So here, Revolver Ocelot from Metal Gear Solid says to Snake that he is referred to as Revolver, right? He's called Revolver. And so he says, Reboruba to, as Revolver, yobareteiru. I am referred to as. So this to is actually identifying exactly what he's being called.
お帰りになるとき、この鉄をもお持ちになってもらえませんか?
Toki, when or at the time. So moving on to toki, this expression means when or at a certain time, and it can be used with verbs, nouns, and even adjectives. Toki with verbs, you simply just put the verb in the casual form and attach toki. Like, when I go to school, 学校に行くとき. Or with nouns, when I was 18, you do 18歳の時. So you add a no particle before toki. And with adjectives, you just put them in their full form followed by toki. So wakai, young, wakai toki, when I was young. Or hima na, meaning to be free, would be hima na toki, when I am free. So here from Final Fantasy XV, we have the example sentence, when you return home, or kaeri ni naru toki. Now this example is actually quite formal because they are royalty speaking, but the core of this grammar is still quite clear. After a verb, you just add toki. So the verb here is naru, and you just add toki. Just make sure that the verb is in a casual form, like with all grammar, as politeness indicators are actually added at the end of a sentence, like des and must, and you never mix them in between grammar in conjunction, only at the end of a sentence. 一条はとっても嬉しそうだ。とても very. This phrase is rather useful to express very in Japanese. Usually it goes before an adjective or verb, like とても暑い. It's very hot. Or とっても疲れている. I am very tired. The first of two examples that we have from video games is from Persona 4, where looking at the reaction of Ichijo, he seems very happy. And so here we can see the text description saying とても嬉しそうだ. He seems very happy. とても coming before the adjective. But it can also be used on its own, quite similar to how very is used on its own in English. 会いたかったんだ、とても. So like the example here from Witcher 3, where after saying that he wanted to meet with her, he just says とても, meaning very much. So you can say that I very much want to meet with you, とても会いたい, or you could just say I want to meet with you, very much, 会いたい, とても.
この町じゃ生きていけなくなる。本当にやるつもりなのか？
つもり. Showing intention or a plan. This next piece of grammar is used to show intention towards doing a certain action, and you put it after the verb to show that intention or plan to do that verb. So like these two examples, first from Cyberpunk 2077, where V asks Evelyn, does she really intend on doing the thing that will make her unable to keep living in the city? And so we have yaru, meaning to do, and tsumori, showing intention. So, do you really intend to do it? 本当にやるつもりなのか?
いい加減にしろ! いつまでそうしているつもりだ!
Or next from Dragon Ball Z, where Frieza is fed up with Goku raising his hands like he just don't care for almost 120 episodes and says, how long do you plan to keep doing that? いつまで? Until when? そうしているつもり? Do you intend on doing that? In both of these cases, we can see that the focus of this grammar's point is to highlight the willingness and purposefully doing of an action. So if you intend to watch this video one more time after you've finished, you could say もう一回この動画を見るつもりです. I intend to watch this video again.
ねえ、君何年生なの？僕は3年生だけど。
俺5年生。
Wa, the topic marker. So now we have finally arrived at the second of the two often confused particles in Japanese, the wa particle, which is often confused with the previously mentioned ga particle. So the wa particle is known as the topic marker, and it's written as ha but pronounced as wa. And at its most simplest explanation, it just shifts the topic of the sentence to what comes before the wa particle. A definition that I personally love to use myself is speaking of or as for. This covers close to 99% of all uses of this grammar particle. When you want to specifically emphasize that you are talking about yourself, you could say watashi wa, speaking of myself, and you can also use this to set the topic for what follows. So if you wanted to talk about the weather, you could say tenki wa, and so on. This introduces that topic to the listener. So in this example here, the boy is asked what grade he is in, and the boy replies with watashi wa 3年生です. As for me, or speaking of me, I'm a third grader. Now, of course, there are more uses for this particle, such as showing contrast and comparison and so on, and if you want more of that detail, make sure to check out my wa versus ga video where I cover it in full detail if you want to have more information. But just for now, think of ga as answering the question to who or what, and wa is simply setting the topic for what you will now continue to talk about.
それなら絶対そんな人たち倒せますよ。リアスは誰よりも強い剣士なんだから。
Wa yori desu. So something is more adjective than another noun. This next grammar point is used to show when one subject is more something than the other. For example, pizza is more delicious than salad. You could say pizza wa sarada yori oishii. So the topic of what you're talking about is set with the wa particle, pizza wa, and then the yori is following the thing that you are comparing to, here being sarada, sarada yori. And then after yori comes the adjective, so how you're actually comparing these two things, here being oishii for delicious. So pizza wa sarada yori oishii. Or like here in this example from Star Ocean 2, we have this character saying that Diaz is stronger than anyone else. And so they say, Diaz wa dare yori mo, more than anyone, tsuyoi, strong.
苦しくはないか。気分はどうだ？どこか具合が悪いとか。
Wa do desu ka? How about? We can also use do desu ka with the wa particle to ask how a certain noun is, or how it's going, or how about. For example, how is this video? この動画はどうですか? I hope you're enjoying it so far. And so the example we have here again is from Metal Gear Solid. And after seeing many people die after coming into contact with him, Snake is a little concerned about the well-being of Hao. And so he asks, Kibun wa? As for your feelings, do da? How are they? Kibun wa do da? How are you feeling?
王族や貴族といったやつは裏切りや陰謀やらが日常茶飯事。
Ya. The second to last particle that we have for this video is the ya particle. Now this is used very similar to the to particle to express and. However, this time the list is not definitive. If you remember, to is speaking of what is mentioned and it only talks about those things. However, the particle ya is used to list multiple things and even imply that there are other items that could still be included in this list, they just haven't been mentioned. So, in a way, you can think of this more like things like something and, rather than just simply and. So if we used our previous example, pizza ya pasta ga suki, you could say, I like things like pizza and pasta. And there could even be more things that I like, I'm just not listing them right now. And so here, from the final demo version of Bravely Default, this character says that for those like royalty and nobility, ozoku ya kizoku, those like royalty and nobility, uragiri ya inbo, things like betrayal and conspiracy are commonplace. Nichijo sahanji. So you can see here that he's not saying that betrayal and conspiracy are the only things that happen to nobility and royalty, but he's saying that things like this are just commonplace. There could be even more. And there could also be more types of groups of people that fit in this group with royalty and nobility. He's just listing these two right now. So this ya particle really has that feeling of there could be more than what's being listed, so things like X and Y.
俺たちの任務はドミナントの暗殺。標的を間違えるなよ。
Yo, the sentence-ending emphatic particle. So a very fitting final particle to cover in this video, as the yo particle is used at the end of a sentence to add emphasis, kind of like you know. Like if something is really yummy, you could say oishii yo. It's really yummy, you know. Or like from the trailer for Final Fantasy 16 here, we have those assassin-looking guys talking about making sure not to miss the target. So, hyōteki o machigaeru na, don't mistake the target, and then yo added on the end to really put emphasis on the fact that he does not want it to happen, right? So like, come on guys, hey, you know, don't miss the target. It's almost like adding an exclamation mark at the end of a sentence, or saying hey or you know. Meteor が落ちてくるんでしょ? へそくりどこに隠そうかしら? いや、それよりもへそくりを持ってどこかへ逃げ出した方がいいのかしら? よりほが. And now finally, the last grammar for N5 and the last for this video is a yori b hoga adjective. More than a, b is what is more adjective. So, for this example, more than textbooks, I hope this video is what you found enjoyable. I hope you found this video more enjoyable than textbooks. 教科書より more than textbooks. この動画の方が this video is what is more 面白いといいな. I hope that it has been interesting. So this grammar point can be used with verbs, adjectives, or nouns, but just remember that when you're using it with nouns, that a not particle must come after the noun. So just like my example that I gave, the rest are all just there in their normal forms. So, like in this final example from Final Fantasy VII, more than that, それより, I wonder if it would be better to run away. 逃げ出した方がいいのかしら? So you can see here that the verb can be used in any form, and you can actually compare anything. You can compare an adjective to another adjective, or a noun to another noun, or a verb to another verb. Just make sure that you have the first one, yori, the second one, hoga, and then whatever you're doing to describe that thing at the end. And that is it. You have now learned every single piece of N5 grammar that there is to learn. So I've compiled numerous grammar lists from several different sources, textbooks, and the internet in making this video textbook for you, in order for you to get the most complete picture of what you need to know at the N5 level, as the JLPT doesn't actually release an official list of exactly what grammar you need to learn, and so textbooks and websites, they need to base all of their information and their lists off of just what was previously covered in past JLP tests that the company has released publicly for people to use for study material. And so sometimes certain websites or books and lists, they might be a little bit incomplete. In fact, when I was going through my searches, almost every list was a little bit different. And so I compiled all of them together in this one big video so you didn't miss out on anything. and we even dipped our feet into a little bit more advanced grammar that was used in both the examples and the explanations throughout the process. So I hope this textbook video was really useful for you and your Japanese studies, and I hope that you enjoyed the journey together with me and video games as we worked through each and every piece of grammar for the JLPT N5 level. If you like this kind of video, please make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the video with your friends to help the channel grow more. And if you really love this kind of thing, please check out my Patreon page and see how you could directly support the channel from continuing to make this content that you enjoy, and maybe even join a part of the community with our Discord. So thank you very much for watching, good luck with your Japanese studies, and I'll see you again next time.